Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast and this special Thanksgiving episode. It's with Arthur Chan, special guest who is currently the Vice President of Medical Affairs at Tarsus Pharmaceuticals. Arthur is awesome. We go over the year in review and talk about our favorite episodes and highlights from the podcast this year. I hope you guys enjoy it. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok now. And don't forget to check us out on the LinkedIn Live platform. We do MSL Talk Live the first Tuesday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And very special, happy Thanksgiving to you all. Hey there, Arthur. Thanks for joining me, my friend. How you doing?
Good, Tom. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Man, it's been a while since we talked about getting together and doing this. So I'm just grateful in the spirit of Thanksgiving. Thanks for having me on MSL Talk today.
Listen, folks. First of all, I know Arthur for a very long time. We've been trying to do this for a long time. So I'm like a little kid, heading into a candy store right now because I got my boy here and this is going to be epic. So we're actually going to break down some of our favorite episodes from this past year. Again, Arthur mentioned Thanksgiving. This is going to be the Thanksgiving episode. I'm certainly grateful for the opportunity to do this and to have people like Arthur on. He has been so gracious as to come up with this idea, and we're going to talk about some of our favorite episodes. So I'm going to start by letting Arthur introduce himself.
So yeah, dude, I can't believe November is half over already, right? So
oh my God, it's crazy.
Probably, I know, almost Thanksgiving. Probably too late for me to start that no shave November thing. Never won that contest. But I'm actually an engineer by training, so I'm the odd duck in the pharma world. But I got my mechanical engineering degree at the University of Alberta. I'm Canadian, and then went to University of Washington for my biomedical engineering degree. And I started my career actually with an Israeli startup company that commercialized a technology similar to what I worked on in grad school. And we were zapping uterine fibroids with ultrasound waves, right? So truly non-invasive surgery. And that was really fascinating, and got to go to Israel and just the smartest people I got to work with to develop this device to bring it to market, FDA approval. It was awesome. But then I wanted to explore pharma and made my way from the uterus to the eyes, moving up, right? So made my way to eye care. And worked on various pharma products and medical devices. And I'm currently the VP of Medical Affairs at Tarsus Pharmaceuticals, and we're a California-based biotech company, really rooted in science and innovation, seeking to develop products to serve unmet needs in eye care. And we're hoping to launch our first product next year. And so, super exciting and super busy time for us, building teams. And that's really what I'm passionate about, right? Building teams and building diverse teams and really focusing on diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And I think we're accomplishing that by the people that we brought in so far, and also giving back to the medical affairs community, right? Through mentoring and helping others grow their careers. And that's what I truly love about what you're doing, right? Your podcast, so many people have said to me in their interview process, I've learned so much from Tom and his MSL Talk podcast. So yeah, it's a truly an honor to be here, and in the spirit of Thanksgiving. Thanks again, Tom, for having me on today.
Well, listen, I'm grateful for you. We've been friends a long time, and this is going to be an awesome episode. And hey, real quick, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our listeners in Saudi Arabia. So I every once in a while, I'll check the rankings, man. We have been really high in the rankings in Saudi Arabia for the last couple of weeks. So thank you guys out there for listening. Really appreciate you.
That's one place I haven't been to yet. Maybe one of these days we'll have to go and do a live episode there.
Do a live episode, man. We got a definitely good fan base there. So, all right, Arthur. So you came up with this idea. You listened to a lot of the episodes. So let's jump into it. What do you want to start with? What episode, do you want to talk about first?
Well, what better way to wrap up the year than some of our memorable and favorites and just, episodes that made a difference in a lot of people's careers, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, I just hired a team here at Tarsus, and it's actually the industry's very first all optometry field team, being in eye care. And we really wanted to bring on people that could truly be empathetic to the clinicians that we're serving, right? And who better to be empathetic to our KOLs than those who have been in their shoes to understand the nuances of clinical practice and have, diagnosed and been with patients, right? So, one of the episodes that resonated with me was the one that Dawn O'Reilly did. And it was like episode 88, where she was talking about why clinicians make great MSLs.
Yeah.
Right. And not only that, but 88 is like a lucky number in Chinese culture, right? So I got to call that one out too. But, Tom, I think a lot of clinicians are thinking of, changing their career path from being in clinical practice to joining industry, right? They're thinking like, what more can I do? And I think that's how Dawn started this episode, right? People are looking for more schedule flexibility and autonomy in managing their schedules a workday. And so this MSL role actually is a great fit for many clinicians.
Yeah.
And we're always looking for people who are not running away from clinic, obviously, but running towards the opportunity. I think when you're in industry, you have that ability to make an even bigger impact, right? Not just help one patient at a time, but like a lot of patients in developing drugs and whatnot. But, the nice thing about this podcast is it also addresses the fact that leaving clinical practice and what you're used to can be really like terrifying, right? Change is not easy. It's often not easy to leave the patients who count on you and who you've loved working with, right? So it's really nice to have like an online community of peers to kind of bounce those ideas off of and hear other people's experiences and how they transition into industry. So I thought she did a really great job in pointing those out. And maybe we could talk about some of the tips that she had.
So one of the things I loved about that episode with Dawn is, first of all, it was her idea. She came up with it. I got such a great response from it. So it really resonated with all the clinicians out there, but she also told her story. So it wasn't just her tips. It was also her career transition story. Right. And she did a great job in talking about that. But yeah, there were definitely a lot of tips.
Yeah, it was her personal journey and just, how she was able to base these tips on her journey, doing the research on the lingo, knowing what it takes and what resources are available, and really being resourceful and being online to learn from others who have done this, right? And that networking piece, I think networking is going to be a theme that we'll talk a lot about today, but is being on LinkedIn and understanding, how to navigate the LinkedIn community to reach out to people that could help her understand a little bit more about the role, to give her the confidence to do that. And not settling, right? Just being patient and letting things happen for a reason, because I am a big believer in fate and serendipity and just everything happens for a reason. And if the right opportunity comes along and it was meant for you, it'll happen, right? And so just really, letting fate take its course and being patient. And, you're used to working with a lot of patients. Now it's your turn to be patient, to wait for that right opportunity. So I think clinicians make great MSLs. We're certainly grateful to have many on our own team. And I think for a lot of clinicians who are interested in making the move into this career space, it's a great one to listen to.
Check it out, episode 88. All right, we're going to jump into another topic that is good for anyone that's looking to break into the MSL role, anybody that's currently in MSL. But episode number 102, which is with Josh Yoder and Kendra Pelt. These are two of my favorite people. This is
my favorite too. Great people, for sure.
Great, amazing people. I'm just so grateful that they came on and they crushed this episode. So Arthur, why don't you tell everybody what this was about?
Yeah, I think that the main takeaway from this presentation and how to prepare for an MSL interview and nail that interview step and the process, for the presentation part, is to treat this interview presentation like you're presenting to a KOL, right? Yep. After all, isn't that what the hiring manager wants to see? They want to know if they can trust this individual who's interviewing for their job to represent the company, right, in front of the most important customers. So this episode was all about how do you create a presentation like you're presenting to a KOL, right? And so I love the fact that they talk about, the storytelling piece, right? It's important that the art of the MSL is exhibited when somebody is doing interview presentations, right? So you got to know how to pull out certain data points that matter. It's not going to be a data dump, but you also have to curate those data points to the person you're speaking with to make it matter to them. So, the audience isn't going to remember numbers, they were saying, but they're going to remember that personal impact that you're going to have on them, right? So that's why storytelling is so important. And I think, to your earlier point about telling a personal story, if you're a clinician, discussing your clinical experience and just how you came along this journey will resonate because people really like those stories. And don't forget to finish strong, right? You got to tie it up in the end. Why should the audience care, right? And I think, to Simon Sinek's, book, starting with the why is important. But at the end, you got to remind people of the why, right? To wrap it all up. And I think those who prepare well for these presentations, that preparedness will shine through. And when a hiring manager sees someone has done their homework and has prepared for these presentations, they know that if they're doing this at the interview, they're definitely going to do this at work as well, right? So this planning and preparation is super important, fosters trust in how they're going to represent and serve customers well. And if I can add one point personally, I think for me, it's to make these presentations memorable, right? It's going to be, 40 candidates that you're interviewing, maybe 6 will get to do presentations and you're going to pick 2, right? How do you stand out from everybody else? And so for me, one of the more recent memorable presentations that we had was a candidate that we actually hired, and she actually involved like interactive gamification in the presentation, right? It was engaging, it was fun, and made me wish like we allocated more time to this presentation, but that's what stuck out, right? So memorability, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. And Kendra actually talked about her actual presentation that she did for her interview with Josh. So again, there was this real life example of what she did to be successful. He weighed in on what he liked about it. So that's one of the things that resonated with me about that episode. And by the way, guys, these, like, part of the reason we're picking these episodes is because these are some of the most watched, listened to, like the numbers are like staggering on these episodes. So that one's a good one.
Yeah, super fun to see both Josh and Kendra, their interaction play out, and the fact that they actually work with each other now because of the strong presentation that she did, right? So a true success story.
Yeah. And I would be remiss if I don't say that one of my earliest episodes was with Kathy Gann, where she talked about how to prepare for a presentation for an MSL interview. So we've had a couple of episodes on that theme. That was like in the first like 10 or 15 episodes. But listen, staying on the interview theme, we're going to talk about an episode with Charlie Cook. I believe it was episode number 94. And this one was about what questions to ask hiring managers on an interview. So what did you think of this one, Arthur?
Only you would remember the numbers for every episode. You've done how many of these now? Like 127 and counting or something crazy?
This is 129, right? I think.
Wow, lucky 129. So yeah, Charlie's a great guy. And he did a great job helping people prep for interviews, right? Because part of the interview is always that moment where the hiring manager or whoever you're interviewing with will ask, hey, do you have any questions for me, right? And it's, you want to give people the time to ask their questions, but also, from the hiring manager's perspective, it's a little bit of a test as well, right? So hiring managers want to know that people are curious. I'm big on curiosity. Having worked at Novartis, curiosity is a big theme for that company and many other companies as well, right? So I think showing interest, having curiosity, and being prepared, that intellectual curiosity piece is like a game changer and a winner for me, right? So, you got to ask about culture, because I think culture is so important to realize whether it's a good fit for both the candidate and for the company, right? It's got to work both ways. So if a candidate is curious about like core values of a company, then it shows that core values are important for that candidate, right? And I love how Charlie called it out, right? And it's important for hiring managers to see that. And then to also tailor specific questions, right, to the interviewer, right? So you're not going to use the same questions for every single person, but rather if you're talking to a regulatory person, if you're talking to a head of marketing, if you're talking to a head of medical affairs or medical communications person, what are some questions that you can carve out? Because you're going to know who you're interviewing with beforehand, right? So you can go on LinkedIn and you can stalk them and see, like, what are some questions you want to ask these people? It shows that you're fascinated with what the interviewers, colleagues have had to share if you can have recollections of those conversations, right? And that shows that you're curious to learn more. And I also think that, it's so important, and Charlie called this out, to turn questions into like conversation and dialogue, right? Not just like a checklist, or that fact that you're rambling on about questions like going off a checklist, but you want to engage in the conversations. And just like the presentations we talked about with Josh and Kendra, to make it really memorable, right? So you want these questions to be like, wow, that person asked a really good question. That's a good candidate, right? And I think questions that show your interest in working as a team, your leadership skills, and maybe even asking hiring managers that you want to work with, like, what's your leadership skill? Not what your leadership skills are like, but like, what's your leadership style like, right? How do your team members describe you, right? Because if you show an interest in that person's style, it shows that you're wanting to know if it matches yours, right? So, and then, the last thing that, Charlie called out was just to be aware of time, listen for verbal clues, right? Like the hiring manager is always thinking, would I put this person in front of our hardest customer? And how you ask questions and engage in dialogue will really show whether or not they can trust you in doing that. So I think this was a really good episode to prepare for how do you ask questions during the interview? How do you do it effectively? And in the best interest of your potential next step in your career, but also in the best interest of the interviewer's time as well.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, you bring up a good point. If you're getting ready to interview, that's an episode you really need to listen to, because Charlie gives you really good ideas of how to formulate questions, and what, like you just said, but how to formulate the questions about what topics. Mm-hmm. He doesn't necessarily give you the specific questions per se, right? But he gives you the concepts that you need to inquire about. Like you mentioned, culture and core values. And I think he even mentioned something about how important it is for MSLs to understand the inner workings of, how you have to work with other folks within the organization. Like, what is the relationship? Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with your commercial counterparts? Right. Shows that you're really thinking strategically about your role within the organization and how you're going to interact and be a team player and that sort of thing. So I really thought that was
cross-functional collaboration, whether you're a team player, is something that certainly they look for. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. So another episode that really resonated with me for a lot of reasons was Paul Ward came to me and said, I have an idea, just out of the blue. Tom, I have an idea for a podcast. You should do something on skip level meetings. Arthur, didn't even know what it was. I was like, you had me at hello. Let's do it, because I don't really even know what a skip level meeting
skip level meetings, like a podcast, and that never became a thing until Paul Ward made it the thing, right? But it's so important, right? Because leaders have skip level meetings all the time, but nobody really talks about like, how do we optimize those settings? Because there's so much that can come out of these meetings.
Yeah. So it's episode number 118. And you should definitely check it out. Not just if you're a leader that is looking for strategic ideas, but if you're an MSL and you're on a team, you may be asked to be a part of these skip level meetings. So you're going to actually have meetings with not your direct manager, one level above, again, skipping a level to that person's supervisor. What does it mean for you? How do you handle that?
Yeah, this was super timely. I just had, my monthly skip level meetings today and tomorrow, right? So I was like, hey, this is perfect timing to kind of review what Paul had to say here. And Paul offers, like you were saying, great perspectives from both the leadership and the MSL perspective. And he's a great leader, right? I think he was like one of your first guests on the podcast.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Right. Talking about how we serve our KOLs during the pandemic. And so he's like not only a great leader, but he's actually in the trenches with the MSLs, and he's been there. Man, we've come a long way from the pandemic, right? And so it's amazing how much and how far we've come and emerged since 2020. Is grateful for that too. But in this episode, Paul starts with like the idea of empathy and the importance of listening, right? Yep. And I love hearing that. Like, no pun intended. Love hearing that listening is important. So people like to feel like they're connected, and that sense of belonging is so super special, important, to be a part of the team. So listening and empathy is super important. People appreciate being heard. So skip meetings, I think, are an opportunity to really dive deeper, both from the MSL's perspective and understanding what's going on with the company, but also from the leader's perspective to know what's going on with their teams, right? Often more effective to pulse surveys, or maybe even as a follow-up to some of these pulse surveys that companies are distributing to their employees. And so I really like the fact that before having skip meetings, Paul specifically called out the importance of ensuring that national directors should first align with their regional directors first, right? If there's like a middle level of management, because I think, you don't want to blindside your direct reports by talking to their direct reports, but it's important to include them ahead of time to kind of get the lowdown on previous conversations and how national directors may be able to reinforce specific topics that the regional directors are talking about, and also be alerted to watch outs, right? What are some questions that this employee may have brought up in the past that you may be able to help out with or be prepared to answer? And these skip meetings are great because it helps leaders gain an understanding of what's working, help diagnose what's needed. And I'm a big believer that, the whole servant leadership idea is to have people that can remove obstacles and work for the people, right? I always joke, and not joke, but I'm serious about the fact that people may report to me, but I work for them, right? So we need to understand what's going on for us to be able to better work for them and remove obstacles. And I think skip meetings also ensure that alignment with, we talked about core values earlier, right? With each other. And I think in order to ensure alignment with core values, we have to be prepared to share honestly and openly, right, what we have to say, and to ensure that if there are things that are going on that may be not fully aligned with the values of an organization or a team, that they get brought up in these meetings, right? So say what's working well, but also what needs to be improved. And these like after action reviews, or they're called like plus deltas, as our chief medical officer calls them, are really important for, I think, our leaders to hear from their team members, and just to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to chime in and contribute to shaping and improving the team. Because if people come up with ideas during these meetings, they'll own it, right? And when people own certain things, they are accountable to them as well, right? So you're bringing the team together to create and foster more of a sense of ownership as well, right? And so honest, open answers, ensuring confidentiality, and even for the MSLs, like this episode is great because Paul had some great ideas and how to prepare them, right? Prepare as if you're going into KOL interactions. MSLs do things so well when it comes to the KOLs. So for these internal type meetings, they should prepare just the same way as they're preparing for a KOL interaction, right? So the leaders are always looking for the quality of the questions, to see who the team players are. I think everyone should be a team player, and who's bringing solutions as well, right? It's an opportunity to share ideas. And it's finally, an opportunity for the MSLs to express to whether it's their VP or national director, what their career path may look like, right? What growth looks like. Always share growth and development ideas with your skip level manager, because you want them to be your advocate.
No doubt, it gives you another opportunity to stand out. Without those, it's one less opportunity that you have to advocate for yourself and stand out and show, how well prepared, how you communicate, some of the great things that you're doing. But to your point, I really think that it's such a great part of establishing culture. You mentioned core values and culture. It's just, I think that in order to preserve the culture in an organization, those meetings are so important. So we're going to switch gears completely, and we're going to get into a totally different area. But episode 92 with Sarah Snyder. So you guys know Sarah was MSL for 20 years.
Love Sarah.
She's the best. She's on my team now. She's one of my top recruiters on my team. And she had this idea where she wanted to talk about how to be successful at MSL and mom life. One of the most popular episodes, believe it or not, obviously, especially amongst our female listeners. But what did you think of this episode, Arthur?
Yeah, mom life, dad life. I mean, just like MSL family life in general, right?
Yeah,
and I think this was a really great episode that Sarah put together, because she definitely showed vulnerability and talked about her own journey in being an MSL, being a mom and try to juggle both at the same time. Our national director actually just started her maternity leave. Super excited for her and her growing family. But for a lot of MSLs with little kids, being able to and even big kids, right, being able to juggle work and home life is tricky. So I love the fact that Sarah started by talking about parenting being a team effort. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my wife, Austin, and we would be able to do what we do if we didn't work well as a team, right? And so often we rely on our friends and our kids' friends, parents. It takes a village, right? Truly a team effort. And Sarah mentioned it's important to be organized in life, right? There's certain things that you want to micromanage, like your schedule, your carpool, and having gotten to know Sarah, I got to say, she doesn't just like talk the talk, but when it comes to organization, she like walks the whole walk, right? It's amazing what she can do. And she emphasized about like auditing time, because time is valuable. You can't buy more time, you can't get back time, but the rigor and being able to audit time and to spend the most quality time with your kids is important, right? So in order to do that, it's okay to outsource stuff, especially the stuff that we're not really good at or don't get a lot of enjoyment out of. Some people love to cook, some people don't. Some people love to clean, some people don't. Some people like yard work. The list goes on, right? It's okay. We don't have to do it all. And so sometimes the outsourcing even goes as far as having a nanny or a pair help with the kids, so that the time you spend with them is truly the best quality time that you can have, right? And it's okay, definitely, to have help so that you can do your job to the best of your ability and be the best parent you can be. And the challenge is that the MSL life is not an 8 to 5 kind of schedule, right? So Sarah calls that out, and so having help that values that flexibility is crucial, right? And to be okay with the parent being home when they have office days, but in allowing them to really focus at work on the days that they're home as well, right? So having that flexibility and having somebody that really understands the MSL role. And I think that means that you as the parent, as the MSL has to talk to the help that you're having as to what your job entails and what your schedule is going to be like, right? So to be able to focus on work and have peace of mind knowing the kids are well taken care of will allow you to be the best contributor I think you can be at work. So and then the other thing that resonated with me that she pointed out is that working on personal development, we always want people to develop, but some people are like, well, do I focus on parenting? Do I focus on personal development? Well, you can actually do both, right? Because Sarah mentions that personal development and growing in the career of the busy parent life also helps the whole family, right? So if the parents are able to grow their careers, it's not being selfish. If you can advance your career, it may provide your family more opportunities. If you're happier with your career, I think that happiness will truly be experienced by your family too, right? And I think I really like how she talked about when you're traveling into MSL, you want to be at your best, right? So like prioritize wellness, eat well, work out, exercise, go to the gym, have an accountability partner. Tom, thanks for being my accountability partner. I know we've been to a few medical.
I always see Arthur at the gym. Always
seen you at the gym as well, right? First thing in the morning. So I've seen you at the gym more than a few times. And I just think this was a really fantastic episode because there's a lot of parents out there who are successful MSLs and medical affairs professionals. And for Sarah to have the vulnerability to share her journal and some of her tips, her journey, and some of her tips was really helpful and really meaningful. And it's not just for MSLs, but all moms, right? Or maybe not even moms, but like all parents out there should listen to this.
It really, it's such a great example of someone that has found, and I could tell you firsthand, I've seen the success that she is and has become. She is such a hard worker. She puts so much effort into everything. She's a tremendous employee. She's a tremendous recruiter. She's a tremendous mom. I see it, like, and she's a wife, the whole deal. Like, for sure. I think that just listening to that episode to just get tips on seeing how a top performer is able to perform, her habits and rituals and things that she's so consistent with.
Yeah, a lot of rigor, a lot of discipline, but she does it well.
Oh,
and man. She has help, right? It's not a one-person show. She's got family support.
Oh, yeah. She's so good. She's so good. So we're going to actually go into another episode, which is number 122. Another awesome, tremendously successful woman, Bernadette Mamone. So Bridget Rasmussen on my team comes up to me at the MSL Society. She pulls me aside and she says, Tom, she's like, you have to have Bernadette on your show. And I said, okay, like, where did this come from? She's like, I was having a conversation with her and she loves the show and she's got a great idea and you need to have her on. And that's where it started. And Bernadette came on and we talked about, she came up with this topic and it was what I do, how I build relationships. One of the highest single day downloads in MSL Talk podcast history.
That's like Taylor Swift levels with that level of download, right? I mean, people really tuned into this one, but I mean, after I was Bernadette, she's amazing. Like she's really a contributor to MSL Society. She's like part of the Healthcare Business Women's Association. Yep. She's like a marathon runner. I think she does like a 5K every weekend. I don't know how she does it all, but just a great person, a great mom, great MSL. And, I love how she started the podcast with just like, wake up and be present, right? And I know she does this every day. Like she's got boundless energy. And, for some of us, that means hitting the gym. For her, it's like running a marathon. I don't know. But this episode really had some great tips for relationship building. And that's so important because when we think of relationships, the first thing that comes to most MSL minds is like, how do we have this relationship with the KOL? But this is really for all relationships in life, right? A lot of the concepts in your podcast series can really apply to a lot of life, aspects, not just like MSL aspects, right? So, and the big idea here is that you're connecting most successfully when it's outwardly focused, right? It's about the other person. And I love the fact that she even brought up like influenced by inspiring others. And John Maxwell, I think he's one of my, yours favorite author as well, right? The whole idea of service, affirmation, attentiveness, authenticity, availability, really, really good, keywords there. But I've always coached our field team to ensure that after a meeting, ensure that you have the next one set up, right? And in order for our medical experts to want to meet again, I really, truly agree with Bernadette that it's important to have that continuum in place for continued engagement. Like, why would that person want to meet with you again, right? It's like getting that second date and third date. And you want that person to continue to want to meet with you, and having that healthy and productive relationship will make that happen. So she also mentioned, using social media to prepare for meetings, right? Nothing's more frustrating than not being prepared for a meeting and knowing something that you probably should have known before. So by knowing which KOLs are speaking, where and what they're speaking about, I think is really, really important and brilliant, right? So it's okay to like stalk people on Twitter, LinkedIn, and social media in good intent, right? For enhancing relationships and having more meaningful and intentional conversations. And really, like these really great relationships, as Bernadette mentioned, come down to one thing, right? And it's the foundation of having the emotional intelligence. And I love how she ended the podcast with that.
And that's a perfect entree to our next episode, because the next episode is with Doug Yao on emotional intelligence. And guys, I literally stalked Doug. Like, I know Doug a long time. He's another guy who's part of the MSL Society. And I just grabbed him and I was like, Doug, I got to get you on, man, because you are like the first founder, leader of emotional intelligence. Got to come on and talk about it. It's such a huge and important factor for the success of any MSL, is to really be good and have a good understanding and develop that muscle of emotional intelligence. So you have to check out episode 95. And Arthur, I know you're a big fan of Doug's as well.
Yeah. Doug's like a brother from another mother. He's actually my mom's half brother's goddaughter's husband, if we can draw the lines.
What?
He's actually, yeah, we met and we're like, hey, wait, you're at this wedding too. So anyway, Doug Yao has to be like one of the most emotionally intelligent. He's intelligent too, but most emotionally intelligent people in the world, right? Totally. Or at least in the medical affairs world. And Doug actually not only talks about EQ, but he actually coaches emotional intelligence. He's an EQ, emotional intelligence coach, right? So, to quote him, the soft skills, interpersonal skills like self-awareness, and interpersonal skills, and if you add in some motivation and passion and grit, will make you really a really emotionally intelligent person, right? So why is this important? It's because MSLs forge relationships, and they have to build this credibility. And they really have to connect with this person to be able to share data effectively. Because if you're just like going out there spewing a bunch of numbers and showing even really, really good data, if the person hasn't connected with you, they will not get as much out of that conversation as if they would have connected with you first, right? So gaining influence and access has a lot to do with building these relationships, as Bernadette mentioned and Doug kind of reinforced in this episode. They need to like you, right? These KOLs really like to like you. And you know, KOLs are often busy. They're with their patients, they're with their clinics, they're short of time. And being, first of all, outwardly focused, as Bernadette mentioned, but also being aware of time and putting yourself in the clinician's shoes is really important, right? It goes full circle. The people who are clinicians becoming MSLs understand this, right? Who better to be more empathetic to clinicians than other clinicians? And so a lot of MSLs already have EQ, right? I think there's a little bit of self-selection that Doug mentioned for the job, but the baseline can be improved with practice, right? We're all always seeking to improve ourselves. And even people that think they're pretty emotionally intelligent, there's room for improvement. So how do we do this? Well, I think Doug gave some really good tips in this episode. You can do an assessment. There's like 360 assessments. You can get assessments from your peers, your manager, people around you, your spouse, your friends, your family. Learn a little bit more about yourself, right? Both from in a work environment and also a social environment. You could take a class. You can get a coach like Doug. And I think just the thought of wanting to grow in emotional intelligence is great self-awareness, right? And, you know, let's not just talk about EQ in terms of forging strong relationships with KOLs, but this is like life lessons that could be great for leading people outside of work and for, you know, within work, internal cross-functional interactions, right? Whether you're doing something for a nonprofit organization or whether you're doing something for work or doing something as a hobby, having that strong emotional intelligence will make you a better leader all around, right? And we want a whole team that really elevates each other and lifts each other up. And so leaders are always looking for people who are coachable. And it's always important to ask ourselves and have that emotional intelligence about, are we coachable? And so, you know, I think a good test of that self-awareness is how you handle the, you know, tell me about yourself question, right? Going to our earlier conversations about like interviews and interview style. You know, I've been in interviews where the candidate takes about 20 minutes just focused on tell me about yourself, even before I get in the word in, right? So obviously someone not that, you know, not somebody that Carolan has prepared, right? But
No,
you know,
definitely not.
no, right? But I think, you know, to be emotionally intelligent is to understand like, you know, when to speak, when to listen, and really have that self-awareness that we can all improve, that we want to grow, and focusing on that feedback to be able to do that, right? Being able to do that and have EQ will give us the skills to connect. And so, you know, just to add a thought to Doug's conversation with you, you know, from a leadership perspective, I think a lot of people think, you know, empathy and EQ, you know, while it's super, super important, a lot of leaders struggle with that, right? Feeling that they will see that as a sign of weakness. But in fact, I think it's quite the contrary. I think it really strengthens that sense of belonging, which is so important, as we mentioned earlier, when we featured the skip level meetings episode, and really demonstrates to your team that you value and respect them, right? So I think EQ really provides the compassion to guide us towards collaboration and cohesive solutions, and really enables us to always think with positive intent, which is so important in these interpersonal relationships. So love this episode that you and Doug had. The conversation is fitting not just for MSLs, but for anybody that wants to improve their emotional intelligence.
No doubt. It's a must watch. You definitely, or listen, you have to check it out because he is so good. And it's such an important factor in our lives, not just as MSLs, as, you know, professionals, but you take it into your personal life too.
Yeah. As people in general, it's so important for sure.
It's so important. And it's so funny, Arthur, you just said two words, positive intent. The next episode that we're going to talk about is about positive mindset. So very recently I met with and talked to Don Sandell, who's not a medical affairs guy. He's got nothing to do with MSLs at all. He is a personal development coach that wrote a book called positive mind shift. And we talk about that. And the title of the episode is Positive Mindset, Positive Outcomes.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Good stuff, man. So what did you think?
Yeah, so this guy was great. He gave the keynote speech at the MSL Society meeting, and even got his book for the team. But I love how he uses science, because we're all scientists, right, to describe and recognize that we're actually pre-programmed as human beings to have negative bias, right? That's unfortunate, but we need to intentionally shift this mindset. So we as human beings and the human species, we're always looking for threats and negativity and danger. And why is that, right? So Don talks about this as a key to survival, right? Our brains are pre-programmed for survival instincts and not necessarily for positive satisfaction. So unfortunately, because we're pre-programmed to seek these perceived threats, we have this negativity bias, right? So we need to be intentional about pushing back, because if our brain is thinking, I can learn from that negativity, and stores it into memory, a lot of our brain is going to be filled with negative thoughts, right? So, I think to be able to intentionally push back and seek positive experiences to shift our mindset from one that's negative to more positive, he mentions the importance of relationships, right? We talk a lot about relationships in our conversation here, Tom, and I think, authentic and trusting relationships really provide positive experiences. Doesn't have to be a lot of them, but just really, really strong, authentic, trusted relationships. And I think relationships, Don mentioned, predict health, longevity, cognitive strength, and even long-term happiness, right? So, if there's one thing that we could do more of over the holidays is really to connect and reconnect. And, I know we're all distracted with our devices and whatnot, but, do something together to connect with someone, have a genuine conversation, share a cup of tea or coffee, play a game, do something that really allows you to connect, and maybe disconnect from all the news and whatever else is going on, on your phone, right? And so Don mentions that 80% of what we say to ourselves is negative because of the bias that we have. And since we have 70,000 thoughts a day, that's a lot of stuff we worry about. And most of it will never happen. And almost all of it will never happen, right? So with that negativity, I think that's where you think negative outcomes, negative outcomes are what you're thinking of. You got to really pay attention to that self-talk, right? Pay attention to your own thinking. And Don's like, if you're aware of what you're thinking to yourself, you can shift that mindset to a more positive one. So, negative mindset is led by emotions. And that emotional part of the brain doesn't have as much impulse control. But when you have a positive mindset, that's more of a rational mind, right? I think he says so. So it comes with more impulse control. And in his book is a great read. He talks about the importance of meditation, diet, sleep, and again, exercise comes up, right? Sounds really basic, right? It seems like anyone can rattle that off. But, with how busy MSLs and just people in life is in general, we don't often dedicate enough time to ourselves, I think, to do this, right? And meditation especially is important to reflect, and perhaps something we can all try and practice again to disconnect and gain control of our own mind during the holidays. And really, I think that positive shift will lead to positive impact, as mentioned in this episode, and not only at work, but at home as well, right? And so much of it is our choice. And by practicing these mind shifts with intention, we can actually shift our mind from that negative thought and bias to one that is super positive. So maybe that's the challenge that we give all our listeners for the holidays this year.
It's a great message. It's a great Thanksgiving message. It's a great holiday message. And I truly, truly believe, when you have to check out that episode, because I truly believe that we have the ability to shift our mind from negativity bias to being positive and being our own self-fulfilling prophecy. If you can control your self-talk, you can change the direction and the future of your life. There's proof, there's studies that prove it, that show it. And Don talks about that. I'm a huge advocate of that. And I'm very intentional in my life, which leads to the last thing we're going to talk about, which is one of my favorite episodes. It's actually a solo podcast. It was just me. It's episode number 86. It's one of our most downloaded episodes. And it's about intentions, how to achieve your goals is the exact title.
Yeah, and they say save the best for last. I love this episode, Tom, and even though it's a solo episode, I think he provides such valuable perspectives and such a broad depth of experience and breadth as well, that what you were able to share with us in this episode is for anyone in any field, not just for MSLs, right? So yeah, perhaps we wrap it up with this one. And this was like one of the first episodes. In fact, I think you started the new year with this episode, right? So I think, it's so fitting that as we approach Thanksgiving, it's a great time for some reflection and just to give gratitude to those who helped us achieve our goals, where you look back at everything that we've accomplished this year. Again, can't believe it's the middle of November already, but just to have some reflection, give gratitude and be intentional about that's great. So, you mentioned about goals, right? No perfect time to start. If you haven't set goals yet for 2022,
do it now.
Do it now. Exactly. And it's never too early to set goals either, right? So write down your goals for 2023.
Yeah.
I always like the idea of SMART goals, right? So both for professional and personal goals, SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely or time bound or something like that, right? So you want to have like SMART goals. And Tom, one of my goals this year was to do a podcast together. Look at this, sometime this year. So
goal attained.
Right? So we're taking action, right? So you always like, it's one thing to set a goal, but also to take action on it, I think is super, super important. And to be present in the present tense, right? We are doing this like together right now. We are accomplishing our goals. So just take the next step, whatever your goals may be for the holiday season and beyond. Keep setting those daily intentions to set your goal. Super, super, important, right? And it doesn't take a lot of time. 15 minutes every morning with your own thoughts. To start with a moment of gratitude, I think is so important, right? Because if you're already in that state of mind, you're grateful for something that's really good, then you've already shifted that negative bias to positive intent. See, all this kind of ties together, right? And so what better time than Thanksgiving to start, right? Put yourself in the positive state, start with gratitude. There's so much to be thankful for. Tom, what are you most grateful for this year?
I got to tell you, I'm so grateful for my team, my family, the people that are around me. I'm so blessed to have just great people around me. People like you, Arthur, that I get to see at conferences and get to talk to and text. And, you mentioned how important it was to maybe unplug and spend time with your family over the holidays. I'm friends with Arthur on Facebook. I see the pictures. I see him spending time with his family. This isn't something he's just saying. This is something that he actually lives and he does. Beautiful family, beautiful pictures. When I see it, it puts a smile on my face. And it's just a reminder of how important it is to really be present and take time and appreciate the people that are closest to you, the people that you love, and make memories and make moments. And that's the thing I'm most grateful for, is the people that I am blessed to be around every day, both in my professional life and in my personal life.
That's awesome. And to your point of spending time with family, I think I've traveled like 150 days this year, right? And knowing that it's only going to get busier as we approach our product launch year, I'm certainly grateful for my wife and kids for holding down the fort, and that our daughter has found a passion in pursuing her degree, pharmacy degree, actually at Purdue, right? So she got to meet some of my colleagues earlier this year. So my work family and my family kind of, meshed together. Super special. Like super grateful. I got to see my grandma recently, my relatives. And, when you're away from home so much, you have to love not only what you do, but the people that you're on this journey with, right? So, to wrap things up, I'm so thankful that I have an incredible team people I can really count on, our work family that I love working with, people who are so genuine, supportive, humble, and just collaborative and cohesive. Very, very fortunate for that. And my extended work family, including our ophthalmologist and optometrist, really a privilege to learn from all of you and just like truly partner in the research and education to better serve your eye care patients. So just grateful for that. One more shout out to my family. Wouldn't be able to do all that I do without their support and encouragement and just being there all the time for me. You mentioned it's so important, Tom, to start celebrating your accomplishments daily. And there's definitely so much to be grateful for and to start celebrating, this year, next year, as we go into the holidays as well.
Yep. Awesome, man. Well, listen, I have two things before I end. I want to thank you because you're awesome. This was great. Special double episode. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And in the season of gratitude, I just want to thank you for listening to this podcast, for making it what it is. It's a community. It's developed a huge community. We have over 200,000, almost 250,000 listeners in 77 countries. And I'm just grateful that I get to do this. I'm thankful that you guys have made it what it is. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to have great people like Arthur to join me.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for your wisdom and your expertise and always being here for the community. You're the best.
Love it.
Take care.
Enjoy, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss episodes in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.